That morning, they pressed the start button on the system whose every line of code I had once written. The blue glow from the monitors lit up their eager faces while I stood quietly behind the glass. When the red text appeared, short and cold, access restricted, unauthorized command, I knew PulseGrid no longer belonged to them. 3 months ago, I was still Noventa Dynamics' chief scientist. Now I was just the person they were desperately trying to call. 3 years earlier, I had left the national lab to chase a dream. Back then, Denver was in the middle of a clean energy boom, and everyone believed artificial intelligence would be the key to the future. I believed it more than anyone. My name is Olivia Reed, PhD in data science, and I truly thought that if I was good enough, I could help the world run better. When I first met Ethan Grayson, I believed he thought the same. He had the kind of voice that made people believe. He wasn't a strong programmer, nor did he understand systems deeply, but he had what I lacked: the ability to make people pay attention. When he said, "We're going to change how energy is stored," I nodded. I didn't yet know that in his we, I would always stand behind him. We founded Noventa Dynamics together in an old warehouse on the outskirts of Denver. I brought the servers, he brought the connections. I remember sleeping there through the hum of cooling fans, hands still smelling of solder, and the mornings he'd bring coffee, talking about investors, speeches, and the future I would help him prove. When PulseGrid was born, an AI that made solar energy storage 40% more efficient, I thought I had finally found my place. Ethan said, "Olivia, you're the heart of this company." I believed him. What I didn't know was that in every meeting, whenever he mentioned PulseGrid, he said, "We developed it, not she did." By the second year, Noventa had grown. Investors arrived. The meetings had cameras now, PR staff, and stage lights. I stayed in the lab, tuning code line by line. Ethan stood on stage talking about the future of energy and the technology we created. Every time I heard we, I told myself it was just a figure of speech. It shouldn't matter who got named. But the truth was, I was fading from my own creation. When the company signed its first major contract, I wasn't invited to speak. Ethan said, "You understand, right? I just want to keep the image consistent." I nodded, because back then I still believed an image couldn't exist without substance. I didn't hate Ethan. In some strange way, I once thought I understood him better than he understood himself. He was terrified of being forgotten, of standing outside the spotlight. And as the company's name grew, so did that fear. He wanted everything new, everything story ready, everything young enough to photograph well. I realized that whenever he said innovation, he really meant different enough to make headlines. That afternoon, he walked into the lab, phone in hand, smiling wide. "Good news," he said. "We're getting an intern from Stanford, Senator Bentley's son." I just murmured without looking up. He went on, "He's got energy, youth, and I think PulseGrid could use a fresh perspective." I asked, "A new perspective or just someone new for the photo ops?" He laughed, that awkward laugh people use when they don't want to answer. "Olivia, you're too serious. A fresh face will be good for us. Investors like that." I said nothing. Only the sound of typing filled the room, steady and calm, while in my mind something began to shift. That night, I stayed late. Winter in Denver, snow drifting outside the window. I sat before the screen, watching lines of code stream past like the rhythm of my own pulse. I didn't regret leaving the lab, or the years I'd given to PulseGrid, but for the first time I wondered, if one day they decided to replace me, would they even know how to keep it alive? The next morning, Ethan sent an email to the entire company. Subject line: "Welcome Noah Bentley, the future of clean energy." I stared at it for a long moment, remembering his words from yesterday: "A fresh face." I didn't know then that the fresh air he spoke of would be the one to drain the oxygen from the room I built. I sat there, watching the cursor blink like it was hesitating for me. Sometimes I wonder how many people out there have felt the same, when you've poured your youth into building something, only to realize one day you've become a forgotten name in a company newsletter. Maybe you've been there too, watching someone else sign their name over your work. If you're hearing this and it feels familiar, maybe we're not that different. Tell me where you're listening from. I want to know where this voice is reaching. And if you believe stories of calm, intelligence, and justice are still worth telling, hit subscribe and stay for the next chapter of this journey. Because sometimes justice doesn't come with applause, it comes in the silence after you decide to walk away. Noah arrived on a Monday morning, just as the snow outside had begun to melt, leaving streaks of water across the concrete floor by the entrance. He looked younger than I expected: black coat, polished shoes, hair trimmed in that perfect Silicon Valley way, like someone who had just stepped out of an interview. Ethan introduced him to the entire engineering team, his tone brimming with enthusiasm, as if he'd just recruited a prodigy. Noah Bentley will bring a fresh perspective to PulseGrid, he said. He just graduated from Stanford, and I believe his young energy will help us see things differently. I stood at the back of the room, my hands clasped in front of me. Noah turned and gave me a polite, slightly awkward smile. He wasn't the arrogant type I'd imagined. There was something genuine in his eyes, a mix of excitement and fear. But I knew that kind of sincerity is what makes people easiest to use. And sometimes, it's also what gets others replaced. After the introduction, Ethan pulled me aside. "Olivia, I want you to help Noah get up to speed. He'll be shadowing you for the next few weeks, learning the process, understanding how we operate." "To what extent?" I asked evenly. "Just observing," he said. "He needs to understand how you work. You're the only one who can really teach him." I smiled faintly. "And then?" Ethan hesitated for a moment before answering. "Then he'll oversee the expansion strategy. I want PulseGrid to have a broader vision, not just stay confined to the lab." I studied him for a long moment. In the light pouring through the windows, he looked like a man walking confidently towards something brilliant, unaware that the glow ahead was just fog dressed as sunlight. Noah started the next day. He came in early, sat beside my desk, and asked endless questions about data models and how the system processed energy signals. I answered each one, brief, precise. Every time I explained a process, his eyes lit up, as if he were discovering something entirely new. Maybe he was, but what caught my attention was how carefully he took notes, not just numbers, but decisions. He wasn't just studying the system, he was studying the way I thought. That afternoon, I walked into the conference room and saw Ethan with a group of unfamiliar faces. He was presenting with his usual intensity. "PulseGrid will be restructured for expansion into the European market," he said. "We now have a dynamic, forward-thinking team led by Noah Bentley." I stopped at the doorway. On the presentation slide, under the words, "Innovation Team," was Noah's photo. Mine was nowhere in sight. Ethan saw me, but didn't pause. "Olivia, come in," he said smoothly. "We're talking about the new direction." I sat through the entire meeting in silence. Every time Ethan said "we," I heard he. Every time he said "young energy," I heard replace the old. When the meeting ended, people shook hands and exchanged cards. Ethan approached me, his voice almost soothing. "I know this surprised you, but don't worry. You're still the core. Noah's just helping with presentations. Investors like a new face, that's all," I replied calmly. "I understand. They need someone to be seen and someone to do the work." That night, I stayed in the lab long after everyone left. The servers hummed softly, steady as breathing. I opened the pulse grid structure, every data file, every line of code. It was all mine. Every formula, every simulation. Then I remembered a file Ethan never paid attention to: the access protocol we signed last year with the cybersecurity vendor. Clause 14b, data sovereignty control. One small line with more power than any of his speeches. I opened it and read carefully. Any modification to core system permissions must be verified by the head of data science, name, Olivia Reed. I nodded. No one but me could authorize changes. When I'd added that clause, the company's lawyer had asked, "Is that really necessary?" I'd replied, "Just in case someone thinks they can run a system they don't understand." The next morning, Noah arrived early. He smiled when he saw I was already there. "Dr. Reed, I went through the pulse grid code last night. It's incredible. I'd love to learn how you connected the predictive energy modules." I looked up. "Do you want to learn, or do you want to change?" He blinked, surprised. "No, just learn. I've never seen a model this seamless." I turned back to my screen, fingers moving across the keyboard. Then learn by watching, not by touching. Over the next several weeks, Noah kept learning, while Ethan filled his calendar with investor meetings. I began to notice how Ethan spoke about PulseGrid. Fewer we's, more they's. They're testing, they're progressing, they'll be announcing soon. And in every sentence, I was nowhere to be found. On Friday night, I received an internal email. Team update. PulseGrid leadership. Under it, Noah Bentley, strategic associate. I read the line over and over. My name wasn't there. I closed the laptop, switched off the lab lights, and in the dim glow from the hallway, I caught my reflection in the glass wall. Something was perfectly clear in that moment. They had replaced me, and they still believed PulseGrid would run as if nothing had changed. I smiled softly, not out of bitterness or sorrow, just the quiet understanding of someone who already knows exactly what comes next. A week later, Noah's name appeared on the official list of PulseGrid's executive team. Ethan announced it company-wide with a subject line that read, like a tech magazine headline, Innovation from Within. Youth is the key to the future. I opened the email, read the first paragraph, then scrolled to the end. The thank you line was short, polished, and surgical. Thank you to Olivia Reed for her technical contributions during the early phase of the project. The early phase, a phrase polite enough to bury 3 years of sleepless nights. I almost laughed. At Noventa, no one ever gets fired. They just archive your phase into the past. Monday morning, Noah walked into the lab looking different, confident. A silver access badge hung around his neck, the kind reserved for the executive group. I glanced at it, then turned back to my screen. He spoke with a balance of caution and pride. Ethan wants me to propose moving PulseGrid to a cloud platform to boost processing speed. What do you think? I closed my laptop, folded my arms, tilted my head. Sounds reasonable. 2 problems, though. 1, PulseGrid already runs faster than anything on the market. 2, the system doesn't have clearance for that cloud access you're talking about. Noah frowned. Why not? Ethan said you manage the permissions. Exactly, I said. I manage them. And I haven't approved any. He forced a small laugh. Probably just a minor error. Right, I replied softly. But around here, minor errors can crash entire systems, especially when no one remembers why they exist in the first place. That afternoon, Ethan called me to his office. His door was always open now, as if glass and sunlight could make dishonesty look transparent. He smiled brightly, poured 2 cups of coffee like we were about to sign a peace treaty. Olivia, Noah told me you haven't granted the cloud access yet. I haven't, I said. No valid request has been submitted. We need to move quickly to stay on schedule. Investors want to see results. Do investors want results? Or just someone younger holding the microphone? His smile faltered, just a flicker. You know I value you, he said. But don't become an obstacle to progress. I'm not an obstacle, Ethan. I'm the warning system. The kind people usually ignore. Until it starts screaming. The air between us thickened. He exhaled, tone dropping lower. I think you should take a few days off. Let Noah handle more. Handle more or make mistakes faster. I stood, straightened my jacket. I'm not taking time off. But you can test how PulseGrid performs without me. That night, I stayed alone in the lab. The servers hummed softly, steady and alive. I opened the PulseGrid core. Every dataset, every algorithm, every simulation. My fingerprints were on all of it. Then I opened the backup folder and began typing. I didn't delete or block anything. I just wrote one small condition into the verification script. If system access authorized profile, read, switch, mode equals monitor. The system wouldn't crash, wouldn't erase data. It would simply breathe, motionless. Like a massive creature still alive but refusing to move unless it heard the right voice. The next week, the office felt like a birthday party I hadn't been invited to, except they accidentally sent me the invitation. Ethan busied himself with investor prep. Noah roamed the halls, giving talks about algorithmic breakthroughs he only half understood. I watched them, amused and faintly sympathetic. They spoke about the future as if it were a free app waiting to download. One afternoon, I overheard Noah on a call in the hallway. I think I can handle it. We just need to unlock core access. Olivia won't mind. I stepped out, standing right behind him. You're right, I said quietly. I don't mind. But the system will, especially if someone touches it without understanding how it breathes. He stammered. I just wanted to help. I know, I said softly. People usually do, right up until help turns into damage. Don't worry. PulseGrid knows how to defend itself. The next day, Ethan sent another company-wide email. Subject: Preparing for the PulseGrid 2.0 demo. He wrote, We're closer than ever to the peak of innovation. I read it and wondered if that peak was the same cliff he was about to fall from. I told no one about the monitor code. I just sat quietly, watching the light reflect across my desk. Some people think power comes from standing in front of a crowd. I've learned it can come from one line of code and silence. The day of the demo, I watched from the upper hallway. Ethan, Noah, and the whole tech team stood around the main console. The countdown echoed through the room. Ethan's smile gleamed under the lights. I glanced at my watch, 11:29 a.m. The verification script would activate at 11:30 if unauthorized access was detected. They pressed run. 1 second. 2, 3. Then the lights on the console turned red. A message appeared across the screen. Neat, quiet, merciless. Unauthorized command detected. System halted. I turned away before the confusion reached their faces. In the elevator mirror, I caught my own reflection, a faint, knowing smile. The kind of smile only someone pushed aside long enough can wear, because not everyone can steal what they were never smart enough to understand. The noise from the control room erupted just as I stepped out of the elevator. Voices overlapped, hurried, panicked, mixed with the sound of keyboards and Ethan's shout cutting through it all. I didn't need to look back to know what had happened. The verification code I'd written 2 years ago had done exactly what it was meant to do: protect PulseGrid from people who thought artificial intelligence was just a performance tool. I walked across the parking lot, the old snow still clinging to the ground in uneven patches. My phone buzzed nonstop. Ethan's name flashed 5 times, then switched to Noah. I let it ring. The sixth call came from the tech department's internal line. I let that one ring too, until it died. It wasn't about making them panic. I just wanted them to feel, for a few minutes, what it's like when everything stops listening. The way I once felt when my work was turned into a prop. By the time I got home, my inbox was full. Mike, the lead engineer, had left a short message. The core is locked. Can't reboot. Ethan wants to see you immediately. I waited a few minutes before replying with one line. I'm no longer in charge of PulseGrid. I made coffee, sat on the sofa, opened my laptop, not to check the system, but to read my personal emails. One new message from Noah. The subject line, I'm sorry. I opened it, half curious, half amused. Dr. Reed, I didn't know it would get this bad. Ethan said it was just a test of access rights, but now everything's shut down. The investors are waiting. Everyone's panicking. I never wanted this to happen. Please tell me what to do. I leaned back, took a sip of coffee, and smiled faintly. Tell me what to do. It sounded familiar, probably because I'd said that same line to Ethan 3 years ago, back when he still pretended to know what he was doing. I typed a few words, then erased them. In the end, I didn't reply. Some lessons only stick when there's no one left to explain them. Later that afternoon, Ethan called again. This time I picked up. His voice trembled slightly, though he tried to sound in control. Olivia, what did you do to the system? PulseGrid isn't responding. The demo's been canceled. The investors are here. I need you to restore it right now. I closed my eyes, picturing his face as he said it, then replied evenly. I didn't do anything. I just let it do what it was programmed to do. Don't say it like that, he snapped. You know how much this affects the company. Affects? I laughed quietly. Ethan, I only isolated the code. You're the one who chose to press the button. He went silent for a few seconds, then hissed through his teeth. If you don't help, you'll destroy everything. No, I said softly. I stopped before you destroyed what I built. After that, I turned off my phone. Outside the window, The sky had gone gray. Snow began to fall. Light, fragile, like ash. I thought about that first morning when Pulse Grid came, alive, running flawlessly, convincing me that fairness could exist at work. Now I knew better. Fairness doesn't appear on its own. You have to program it in. The next day, Noventa was in chaos. Rumors spread faster than Wi-Fi. Some blamed hackers, others said hardware failure. Ethan told the press it was a temporary technical issue. I watched the news. Him standing in front of the cameras, his face tense beneath a forced smile. I'd seen that look before, the first time he lied to investors. Maybe this time would end the same way, only now there was no one left in the lab to save him. 3 days later, Mike called. His voice was low, tired. Olivia, they're bringing in external consultants to try to unlock the core, but no one's willing to take responsibility. Noah hasn't spoken since. Good, I said. Sometimes silence is the most expensive lesson. He hesitated. Do you regret it? I thought for a moment. No. I only regret not staying silent sooner. That afternoon, I went to the small coffee shop on the corner, the place where I used to write code when I needed quiet. The owner greeted me with the same warm smile, the one who always asked about that energy project thing. I sat down, opened my laptop, and stared at the blank screen. No more pulse grid code, no red alerts, just a clean page, ready for something new. I opened a new file and typed a name. Horizon. A new project, not revenge, just a beginning. One without anyone standing on stage to speak over me. I wrote the first line of code. If integrity, ambition, then the system fails. Somewhere in the city, Ethan was probably still trying to restart Pulse Grid. Maybe he'd even manage it someday. But even if he did, he'd never understand why it didn't run the same. Because Pulse Grid wasn't just built to operate, it was built to recognize who commanded it. And that person, from now on, wasn't him. A week after the Pulse Grid incident, I returned to Noventa's office for the first time since the failed demo. Not out of nostalgia, not to prove a point. I just wanted to collect the few things that hadn't yet been labeled company property. The room looked the same, but the air felt heavier, as if the entire building was struggling to hold in a secret it couldn't fix. Noah sat at his desk, hair a mess, dark circles under his eyes. When I walked in, he looked up like someone who'd just escaped a fire. Dr. Reed, I raised a hand. No apologies. I'm not a therapist. He gave a nervous half smile. I just wanted to say, I didn't know it would turn out like this. No one ever does, I said. But some things don't need understanding. You just need to know not to touch them. Ethan wasn't there. His office door was closed, blinds drawn. Strange, considering he used to keep them wide open so everyone could see how busy he was. I asked Mike, who just shrugged. He's trying to call the investors. Heard Mark Bentley's pulling out. Makes sense, I said with a faint smile. People usually fold when they realize the board's out of moves. I gathered my things, a few folders, a hard drive, and a framed photo from the first year's engineering team. In the picture, Ethan stood in the middle, one hand on my shoulder, smiling brightly. I stared at that smile for a while, wondering if back then he smiled out of pride, or just relief that someone else was doing the work for him. As I was about to leave, Ethan stepped out of his office. He looked different. Shirt wrinkled, tie crooked, hair unkempt. His voice was hoarse, but he still tried to sound like the man in charge. Olivia, we need to talk. This time truthfully, I asked. He sighed. I know what you're thinking. But PulseGrid is the company's project, not anyone's personal property. I nodded. True. But this company was built by the people you call the early phase. And you know what? The early phase is the foundation. If you rip out the foundation, you shouldn't be surprised when the house collapses. He took a step closer, voice softening. Can you help me? Just unlock the system and let us recover the data. I'll make sure you're credited. I laughed quietly. Ethan, you had your chance when I sat 2 desks away. Now it's too late. Besides, you don't need me. You've got Noah. He's the future, remember? His eyes flickered, then dropped to the floor. What do you want, Olivia? I looked straight at him. Nothing. I already have what I needed. freedom. As for PulseGrid, it's just doing what I taught it to do. Never obey anyone who doesn't understand it. He stood silent for a long time. When he finally spoke, his voice was almost a confession. I just want this company to survive. Then learn to keep it alive with truth, I said softly, not with presentations. I turned to leave. Noah stood by the doorway, eyes caught between guilt and awe. You're really leaving? Yeah, I've stayed long enough to see how this story ends. What about PulseGrid? It's fine, I said with a small smile. I taught it how to protect itself. The company, though, not so much. I walked out into the cold wind. The glass doors slid shut behind me, and somewhere inside I heard voices. Maybe Ethan arguing with an investor, maybe just his conscience. Either way, I felt lighter. That evening, I stopped by a small bar downtown, the kind where tech people went to complain about stupid investors and impossible deadlines. I sat at the counter and ordered a gin and tonic. The bartender glanced at me. You work at Noventa, right? Used to, I said. Now I'm on an extended vacation, possibly permanent. He grinned. Sounds like you just got out of rehab. Depends on how you look at it, I said. At least I was the one who walked out the door. When I got home, my inbox was full again. One message stood out. From Mark Bentley. Ethan made a mess of things. I hear you're the only one who can restore PulseGrid. Meet me. I'll make sure you get full control. I read it, then laughed softly. A tempting offer, almost word for word like Ethan's pitch 3 years ago. Only the speaker had changed. I shut the laptop, poured myself a glass of water, and watched the snow fall outside. There are games where even if you win, the board stays dirty. And sometimes walking away from the table is the only way to win. 3 days later, another message from Mark Bentley appeared in my inbox. This time it wasn't an offer. It was a calendar invite, marked urgent, with a note attached. We need to talk. Immediately. I stared at it for a moment, then laughed. People only call something urgent when they've just realized they've lost control. The meeting took place in a high-rise restaurant overlooking downtown Denver. Mark arrived right on time, composed, commanding, the kind of man more used to giving orders than hearing answers. He shook my hand, the smile on his face perfectly balanced between polite and desperate. Thank you for coming, he said. I'll get straight to it. Ethan made things worse than I imagined. PulseGrid is locked down, our primary investor is pulling out, and Noah, well, he's completely lost. I sipped my coffee, keeping my face neutral, though the corner of my mouth twitched. How bad is it? Bad enough that we're considering declaring technical bankruptcy. I nodded. That's unfortunate. But I'm not part of the company anymore, remember? He leaned back, eyes narrowing. I know. But PulseGrid is your creation. Without you, the data remains permanently frozen. I can bring you back, this time with the title you deserve. I smiled faintly, the sarcasm impossible to hide. Mr. Bentley, you sound like you're asking me to put out a fire someone else started, just so they can cut the ribbon all over again. He sighed. You're letting emotions get in the way, I replied evenly. Not emotions. Memory. He went quiet for a while, then said carefully, Ethan will be out soon. I don't want PulseGrid to die with him. Work with me, and I'll make sure you get real ownership. I set my cup down and leaned forward slightly. Mr. Bentley, you're a politician. I'm an engineer. You believe in power, I believe in structure. And this structure, I designed it so no one could pull its strings, not even you. PulseGrid doesn't die with anyone. It just stops listening to those who never understood it. The meeting ended without a second handshake. As I stood, Mark called after me. You'll regret this, Olivia. The market doesn't wait. I turned back with a calm smile. I know. Luckily, PulseGrid doesn't trade shares. That night, I walked through downtown. The city still glowed. Towers lit up as if nothing had collapsed. But inside, I knew Noventa was coming apart like a ship with no rudder. My phone buzzed. A message from Mike. Ethan's gone. Noah resigned. They're saying you caused the PulseGrid crash, but no one believes it. I smiled as I read it. Good, I thought. You don't need belief, just understanding. Back in my apartment, I opened my laptop. The familiar line appeared. PulseGrid Core Access Verified. I opened a backup directory, the one that held the original code. There was something surreal about looking at a creation that had done exactly what you never had to tell it to. It felt like staring at a reflection of yourself, quiet, deliberate, and slightly dangerous. I began typing the first lines of my new project. Horizon was no longer an idea. I wanted it to be more than an energy storage system, something that could self regulate, adapt, and survive without oversight. A system that could exist even if abandoned. As I coded, I laughed softly. Maybe, deep down, I was just writing the upgraded version of myself. 3 days later, the financial papers ran the headline: Noventa Dynamics faces bankruptcy as investors withdraw after Pulse Grid collapse. Ethan was nowhere to be found. No statements, no defense. Halfway through the article, I saw my name mentioned briefly. Olivia Reed, former head of data science, declined to comment. I folded the paper with a small smile. It's funny. People still don't realize that declining to comment sometimes means I've already won. That week, I got a call from Carmen, a representative at North Axis, a major clean energy firm in California. I heard you were the real mind behind PulseGrid, she said. We need someone who understands how AI interacts with energy systems. Would you be interested? I leaned back. I don't work for companies anymore, but if you're open to collaborating with Horizon, we can talk. Horizon? She asked. My new project. Less drama. And absolutely no CEOs who talk about youthful energy. She laughed. Fair enough. Send me the proposal. I hung up and looked out the window. The snow had stopped. The city shimmered under a thin layer of silver light, quiet enough that I could hear my own heartbeat. I wasn't in Noventa anymore, but Noventa was still tangled in the network I had built. Maybe that was justice. Or maybe it was just physics. Every action has an equal and opposite reaction. Either way, I smiled. It's rare when justice and physics finally agree on something. 2 weeks later, Horizon officially came to life. There was no grand opening, no ribbon cutting, no speech. Just me, an old desk, a laptop, and a small wooden sign hanging outside a rented office in an old industrial park on the outskirts of Denver. I named it Horizon not because I wanted to sound like a startup opening new frontiers, but because I was tired of looking back. Carmen was the first to sign a contract. North Axis wanted to test an energy storage prediction model for the winter crisis period. She sent me an email with exactly 3 lines. Good budget. Full ownership is yours. We just need it to work. It was the kind of contract I'd been waiting for. Short, clear, and best of all, without the words young and dynamic. I started hiring. Mike was the first person I thought of. I sent him a short message. Want to start over? He replied 5 minutes later. When do we begin? Then came Sarah, the systems engineer. Ethan had once pushed to a side department because she didn't fit the brand vision. When I called, she laughed. His vision's probably looking down from the cliff by now. My team was small, 5 people, but no one needed motivational speeches. We worked in silence, breaking it only with laughter when someone quoted one of Noventa's old slogans. Once, Mike mimicked Ethan's voice. We don't need to be perfect. We just need to inspire. I shot back, right, and now his company's an inspiration for risk management courses. The whole room laughed, but under the laughter was absolute focus. Horizon began to take shape like a living organism. I rewrote the system core, refined the learning algorithms, and built in self-regulation, the one thing PulseGrid had lacked. I wanted to create something that didn't need guarding, a system that could shut itself down and reboot elsewhere if someone tried to take it. An AI with a survival instinct. I joked with Mike once. This time, if someone tries to steal the work, the system will steal back access first. Meanwhile, the news about Noventa spread fast. Noventa Dynamics declares bankruptcy. Investor Bentley withdraws all funds. CEO Ethan Grayson, missing after company collapse. Every headline was just another version of the same story. A company once praised as the future of energy was now the poster child for the risks of leading by slogan. I didn't feel joy, just relief. It was almost funny, remembering the meetings where Ethan talked about his vision to change the world. The world hadn't changed. Only he had disappeared from the corporate map. Some rumors said he'd left the country. Others claimed he was blaming me. I just thought if he ever tries to find me, I'd send one line back. I don't do human error maintenance anymore. 3 months later, Horizon completed its first trial with North Axis. The results surpassed every target. Processing speed doubled, costs down nearly 30%. Carmen called over video, a rare smile on her usually stern face. Olivia, I know I shouldn't say this, but you just made my entire engineering department feel useless. I laughed while typing the last lines of the report. Don't worry, I felt that way for 3 years at Noventa. It passes. She laughed too. We'll expand the project. Prepare the Phase 2 contract. When I ended the call, the afternoon light spilled across the room through a narrow window. The office was quiet, except for the soft hum of the laptop fan. I leaned back, took a deep breath, and felt, for the first time, that the long road was finally behind me. That night, an unfamiliar email arrived. No name in the sender field, only a subject line. Can we talk? The message was short. I know I don't deserve it, but I want to apologize. Noah. I read it a few times and left it unanswered. Part of me wanted to ignore it. Another part was curious. Maybe because out of everyone who survived Noventa, he was the only one who might have actually learned something. 2 days later, another message. I've left Denver. If I ever get the chance, I'd like to start over. This time, for real. I didn't reply, but I thought at least someone finally studied for the test. One weekend afternoon, Mike brought in a printed newspaper. On the front page was an article about Horizon. Former engineer from collapse company builds tech that could save the energy industry. He grinned. Looks like they finally put your name on it. I looked at the paper, then folded it. My name doesn't matter. As long as no one stands over my work and says we did this, I'll be fine, he laughed. Still as sharp as ever. Not sharp, I said, smiling. Just selective. Milder now, but it lasts longer. That night, I poured a small glass of wine and opened Horizon's interface. The screen glowed with the words, System active. All nodes synchronized. I smiled and murmured to myself, Good. This time, if anyone wants to take it, they'll have to learn to respect it first. And somewhere in that soft blue light, I felt something strange. As if at last justice had learned how to choose a side. One autumn morning, when the Denver air was just cold enough to wake you up without coffee, I got an email from an address I never thought I'd see again. Mark. Bentley et. The subject line read, Strategic Collaboration Proposal. I almost dropped my cup. The man who once saw me as a legal liability now wanted to collaborate. I opened the message, 3 short, polished paragraphs, the kind of language only investors mastered. Olivia, I've been following Horizon. We're restructuring some of Noventa's remaining assets, including PulseGrid. I believe you're the only person capable of bringing it back. Think of this as a chance to close the past. I read it again, then laughed out loud. A chance to close the past? How poetic, coming from the man who started the fire, now offering to teach me how to put it out. I didn't reply immediately. I forwarded the email to Mike with one line. Want to hear an old story retold? He replied 10 seconds later, grabbing popcorn. We sat in the office, reading the email together, commenting as if we were watching a documentary. Strategic Collaboration Proposal, Mike read slowly. Translation. Fix my mess, but make sure my name stays on the plaque. I grinned. You sound fluent in investor speak. Don't need to be, he said. I survived 3 years of Ethan's meetings, but after the laughter faded, I still opened my laptop and typed a short response. I didn't refuse outright. I just wrote one sentence. If you want to resurrect PulseGrid, be ready for it not to belong to you anymore. 2 days later, Bentley called for a video meeting. His face appeared on screen, clean-shaven, composed, wearing the confidence of a man who believed money could soften any edge. Olivia, I'm glad you replied, he began. I know there were misunderstandings between us. I don't recall misunderstandings, I said evenly. Just bad decisions. He smiled, the polite kind that hides irritation. We need PulseGrid operational again. The technology still has value if restored. I'd like to invite you to lead the project. Horizon can join as a partner. And what do I get in return? Equity, full technical control, and the opportunity to show what you can do without Ethan limiting you. I leaned back, silent for a few seconds. I've already shown that, Bentley. Horizon exists, runs, and doesn't need anyone's permission. As for Pulse Grid, if you want it to live again, it has to be reborn properly. I don't fix other people's pasts, but I can rewrite the future, he frowned slightly. You mean buy out Pulse Grid entirely? I smiled. No. I mean, I'll take what's left of it, fold it into Horizon, and make it better. You can keep the corpse, I'll take the soul. The call ended there. Bentley said he'd consider it. I knew that meant he'd be calling a few lawyers to ask how to negotiate with someone who didn't need money. Spoiler, you can't. A week later, the news broke. North Axis, my current partner, announced the acquisition of Noventa's remaining intellectual property, including Pulse Grid, for integration into Horizon. Naturally, I was the one who signed off on the technical verification. The media called it the return of buried technology. To me, it was more like a selective cleanup. During our first internal meeting after the deal, Mike asked, "Do you find it ironic? 3 years ago, they kicked you out to save the project. Now they're selling the project just to stay on your good side." I took a sip of tea. The world's round, Mike. The problem is, not everyone knows where they're standing on that circle. Horizon quickly became the industry's focal point. Our first financial report exceeded projections, and Carmen called just to say one sentence. "Congratulations, Olivia. You just turned the people who didn't believe in you into footnotes at the bottom of history." I replied, "I've always liked footnotes. Small, but hard to ignore." That night, I stayed late at the office. The glass walls reflected the city lights, while the screen in front of me displayed the familiar line: Horizon System. Pulse integration completed. I stood there for a moment and whispered, "Welcome back, old child." The room was quiet, only the faint hum of the machines. I could almost feel Pulse Grid breathing, not because it had been revived, but because it was finally where it was always meant to be. I poured myself a small glass of wine and looked out at the city. Denver glimmered, lively, ambitious, full of people still chasing technology that would change the world. I laughed softly and thought, they'll need a few more years to realize the truth. It's not AI that changes the world. It's the human who knows when to pull the plug. And to me, that's the smartest kind of revenge there is. 3 months after Horizon completed the Pulse Grid integration, Denver seemed brighter. Not because of the streetlights, but because every time there was an energy tech conference, people mentioned Horizon as if it were a synonym for miraculous resurrection. The media called me all sorts of grand titles: the woman who beat the system, the engineer who made investors bow, the one who reprogrammed fairness. I read them all, then folded the newspaper and tossed it onto the desk. The press always loved symbols. I just wanted to drink my coffee in peace. But nothing ever truly stays peaceful in tech. One Monday morning, I received an invitation to the National Clean Energy Conference. North Axis was the main sponsor, and they wanted me to speak in a session titled "The Future of AI and Fairness in Innovation." I laughed when I read it. Fairness? They'd picked the right person. I'd watched it be destroyed and then rewritten it in code. The conference took place in the city's largest convention hall. The room was packed. Most of the faces were ones that had ignored me in meetings 3 years ago, now listening intently. When I stepped onto the stage, the lights hit me full on, blurring everything else into the background. I took a breath and began. "I used to think fairness was something others gave you. Turns out it's something you have to design yourself." The room went silent. Then I continued. "If your system collapses when one person leaves, the problem isn't that person. The problem is you built a system to serve the wrong people." Applause erupted, rolling through the hall like a wave. Looking down, I saw a few familiar faces. Noah in the third row, more composed now, nodding. And in another corner, Mark Bentley, expression neutral, fingers tapping lightly on his chair. Maybe he was wondering how the liability he once dismissed had ended up on the main stage. The answer was simple. I didn't need anyone's permission anymore. After the talk, people lined up to shake hands, exchange cards, and propose collaborations. I smiled, thanked them, then slipped out of the crowd. Compliments are like echoes. They can make you forget how long you were once unheard. Outside the hall, I spotted Noah waiting. "That was incredible," he said, voice earnest. "I've learned a lot from my mistakes." I nodded. Mistakes are the cheapest tuition. If you pay with your own pride, not someone else's. He smiled, a little embarrassed. "I know. And if there's room at Horizon, I'd like to help. I don't need a title, just a chance to do things right." I studied him for a few seconds. "All right, but here's the rule. No one is the center, not even me." He nodded firmly. "I understand. I promise. No more turning vision into slogans." I laughed. "Good, because at Horizon, our only slogan is work first, talk later." That afternoon, back at the office, Mike handed me the quarterly report. "You know," he said, "revenue's doubled, and our reputation's climbing faster than Tesla's stock in 2021. I set the report down and smiled faintly. I don't care about reputation. I just want to make sure that this time no one can erase the names of the people who actually built it. "Relax," Mike said. "Your system logs every access, even if someone tries to change the author signature." I shrugged. Then I guess I've successfully programmed memory. That evening, the city lights reflected through the office windows. I opened Horizon's main dashboard, every system running smoothly, data pulses steady like a heartbeat. In the corner, a small line of text read, "PulseGrid Legacy Module. Active." The irony made me smile. The very thing that once cost me everything was now the most stable part of the whole structure. Maybe because it was written in pain. And pain, unlike code, never crashes. I stepped out onto the balcony, glass of wine in hand. The wind was cool against my hair. Below, Denver buzzed, bright towers glowing like everyone was still trying to prove they were on the right path. I smiled. Somewhere down there, someone was probably still talking about youthful energy, still believing innovation came from age, not resilience. They'd learn soon enough. Age isn't measured in years. It's measured in how many times you stand back up after being dismissed. My phone buzzed. A message from Carmen. "Congratulations. Horizon's been chosen as the national partner for the Smart Energy Initiative. You're about to be very busy." I replied, "Good. I like being busy. It keeps me from thinking about the past." Setting my phone down, I watched the sky fade into violet. A gust of wind carried the faint sound of traffic and the scent of coffee from the cafe below. I breathed deeply. The feeling of calm spread through me, like quiet electricity. Everything, finally, was where it belonged. Tomorrow, Horizon would grow. I knew that. But tonight, I just wanted to sit here, watching the city that once witnessed my failure now shining with the light from my own building. There was something deeply ironic and quietly beautiful about that symmetry. I laughed softly to myself, whispering words meant only for me. Revenge might be sweet, but peace, that's what truly intoxicates. And under Denver's glow, the wine in my glass caught the reflection of a line still glowing on my laptop screen inside the office. Horizon system. All nodes synchronized. A simple line of code, but to me, it meant everything. I sat there a little longer, watching the city lights blend into the darkening sky, and wondered how many people out there had ever felt this, the quiet triumph of reclaiming what was always yours. No shouting, no vengeance, just leaving at the right time and returning the right way. If you've listened this far, I want you to pause and think. What moment in this story moved you the most? Was it when she was cast aside, or when she came back and made everyone look at themselves? Leave your thoughts below. I read every comment because inside them are little stories, some that sound just like mine, only with a different narrator. And if you enjoy stories where justice doesn't need to shout to be heard, where the quiet ones rewrite the ending, subscribe and turn on the notification bell. Because sometimes silence is the loudest answer of all. Thank you for staying until the end.